Assalamualaikum. Today we will present about experiment 4, which is frictional force, and my name is Amira Adani and this is our group members.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hi everyone, my name is Amira Natasha binti Ruslan.
My name is Nur Maisarah binti Jamaluddin.
My name is Nur Natasha Nadisha binti Abdul Halim.
Nur Hafizah binti Gaini.
Tira binti Asma Peter.
Hi, my name is Amira Adani.
Objective is to determine the coefficient of static friction of different surface. The vector quantities of force and velocity have magnitude and direction. The velocity is the speed of movement of a particular object in a given direction. When an object accelerates or has a change in velocity, force is present. When a body is at rest or in equilibrium, its resultant force, the total of all the forces acting on it, is zero. Between two masses, there is an attracting force known as gravity. The magnitude of the force depends on the magnitude of the masses. The gravitational force that acts on an object on Earth is approximated as F gravity equals to mass gravity, where m is the mass of the object and g is the gravitational acceleration. The magnitude of the gravitational force exerted on an object is referred to as its weight. Normal force is a contact force that acts in the normal direction or perpendicular to the contact surface between two objects. Friction is the force that resists the relative motion of one surface in contact with another. There are two types of friction, which is static and kinetic. Static friction is the friction that acts on an object that is at rest. Static friction is the force that must be overcome in order to move a static object. The maximum value of static frictional force is given by static frictional force is equal to nu s n, where nu s is the coefficient of static friction and n is the normal force. The coefficient of static friction is a dimensionless constant that depends on the object and the surface it is lying upon. Kinetic friction is the friction that acts on a moving object, and the kinetic frictional force is given by kinetic frictional is equal to coefficient of kinetic friction and n, where nu k is the coefficient of kinetic friction and n is the normal force. In this experiment, the frictional force on a horizontal and an inclined plane between a wooden block and a rubber surface will be measured. The coefficients of static friction will then be determined from the plotted data.
So the apparatus that has been used for this experiment is 10 Newton spring scale, wooden block with rubber surface, 50 gram masses, tabletop, and wooden block.
So after we set up the spring scale, we can start the experiment. So we use a Newton unit. So we're going to start with the rubber surface first. Then we start weight with 50 gram. Then we just pull it and slowly until it stops. Then we record the reading. So here we got 0.4 Newton. So
Then we repeat it again and add the weight. Okay, that's all.
So this is our result about mass of wooden block with a rubber surface. However, this is result for non-rubber surface toward the floor.
This is the body diagram of the wooden block. As we can see, 4 forces acted on the object, which is normal force, weight, applied force, and friction force. On the left, we have graph of static friction force against the normal force for a rubber surface. And on the right, we have the graph of static friction force against the normal force for a non-rubber surface. Based on the graph, we identify the coefficient of static friction force by calculate the gradient of each graph. The coefficient of rubber surface is 0.545, while for non-surface is 0.25. The coefficient of a rubber surface is more than non-rubber surface because its surface is more rough and more friction force is needed to move the object, while the coefficient of the non-rubber surface is less because the surface is more slippery, means there is less friction force and the object is easier to move.
Next is question.
How can anti-lock brake stop a car in a shorter distance than regular brake? The anti-lock brake present will lock up and out of control in braking situation where the wheels on a non-anti-lock brake equipped vehicle would lock up. Anti-lock brake will generally provide a shorter controls. From your experiment, which material has the highest coefficient of static friction? From the experiment, material that has the highest coefficient of static friction is wooden block with rubber surface. Thus, agreeing with the hypothesis of this experiment that the frictional force is directly proportional to the texture and hardness of the two surfaces rubbing together. The coefficient of static friction is determined by the ratio of the force of friction between two bodies and the force pressing them together before the. Once the mass begins to slide, does it move smoothly or does it undergo stop and go motion? Explain the motion. It will undergo stop and go motion because it has a rough surface, so it takes time to move faster. As the mass increases, the force that produced downward is bigger. Thus, the mass couldn't slide smoothly as the friction between the surface become greater.
Conclusion. From this experiment, the main objective for this experiment is to determine the coefficient of static friction of different surfaces. From the result obtained, it's proven that the coefficient of static friction can be zero if the surface is smooth. For example, the coefficient of static friction for table 5.1, which is rubber surface towards the floor, is higher than table 5.2, which is non-rubber surface towards the floor. So, the hypothesis is accepted and the main objective also achieved. Next, to reduce the experimental error, make sure that I are perpendicular with the spring scale for getting an accurate result.
In this experiment, the coefficient of static friction of different surfaces is tested with the wooden block and the rubber surface. The wooden block and the rubber surfaces with 50 gram mass are attached with a string and then pulled to get the spring scale reading. It is then repeated with different masses to show the connection between mass and the friction force. Lastly, there is a systematic error in this experiment during observation. This has caused the reading to be different from the actual readings. This error can be avoided by taking several readings during the experiment.